Now this is that Kubota cylinder head that we've been playing around with. And you can see on the head here itself, nice and machined surface, nicely machined surface, kind of gunky. This is gasket, residual gasket material. And you also see some like carbon on here as well. We need to get that cleaned up before we ever reuse it. And now a few different methods to take this off. I usually start though with a razor scraper, just like we did for the block. Now be very careful with this razor scraper. As you're pushing it along, you catch into these coolant passages or bolt holes, and that snags in there. Those razor blades are very fragile, it'll break, so make sure you have safety glasses on. So I just take it, and don't put it on too much of an angle. Okay, if you put it on too much of an angle, it's going to dig into that. You don't want to do it. You want to make it nice and light, like this. Peel that material right off. Okay, it's not something that's going to take you 2 seconds. I mean, it takes a little bit of time to do, so don't be in too big of a rush or you might damage the head. Okay, you definitely don't want to nick or burr or score that head. You just want to clean it up. Okay, make sure your blade is sharp. If it starts to feel dull, change it out. You know how cheap they are? You can get them at the Dollarama. Clean up all this material just like this. Now it doesn't have to look brand new like this here. Okay, it can have this ugly staining on it, as long as that staining isn't going to affect the sealing. Okay, if you have some pieces that are really particularly awful, you can work your razor back and forth like this to get it and help peel that off instead of digging in and hammering on it. You can see this does a really great job, peels off big chunks of it, and away it goes. You really don't want to use any power tools for this. You just want to remove the gasket material itself and then check it to see how true it is, how straight it is. Okay, if you take off any material, you may have to send it for machining. Some manufacturers have quite a bit of allowance, right? They might have some really nice head gaskets that can take up a lot of variance in there. And if you end up taking off a bunch of material, well then maybe you do have to get it machined. I'm just going to carry on with this here. Peel it off. We'll do a fast forward thing so it doesn't take all time. And take a bit more off with some Scotch-Brite. That's allowable. Now whenever you do use Scotch-Brite or anything like that, make sure it's clean. Okay, and try to keep it square. If you just use your hand and go over this, you might actually end up wearing into some of these here and kind of chamfering the edges. Might keep it from sealing perfectly. So it's not a bad idea to use some sort of a block, like a sanding block, or something nice and flat. In this case, I'm going to use this case and put it on here. You can tape them together or rub them together like this. Okay, and when you do that, it's going to take the shape of this nice flat area and not go down in these holes and make that any worse. Now I'm just going to pause and fast forward me clean this up with my Scotch-Brite, and we'll see what it looks like when we're all done. Okay, we just clean this up by hand. That's it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like, this is pretty close to perfect. You can see like a difference in color here. This isn't coming off. This is staining. I mean, we can take that off with machining process, but only if we need to. Okay. Now, some things you can see on here, some pitting and kind of corrosion, maybe from some coolant, and it's a little bit over here too. Now I can feel this raised and bumpy with my fingernails. That's not a good sign. So this head may actually need some machining.